The Boeing 777 cruised through midnight darkness at 37,000 feet, its passengers lost in dreams above the Pacific Ocean. In Seat 8A, Major Valkyrie Vex Nakamura slept fitfully, her calloused fingers still bearing the faint impressions of joystick grips, her dreams haunted by the screaming engines of F-22 Raptors she'd once commanded through Syrian airspace. The overhead reading light cast harsh shadows across her weathered face, revealing the subtle scar that traced from her left temple to her jawline, a souvenir from an ejection seat that had saved her life 18 months ago. The aircraft shuddered suddenly, jolting passengers awake. Emergency lighting flickered on as the captain's voice crackled through the intercom system, unusually tense despite his professional composure. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Morrison speaking. We're experiencing an unusual situation requiring immediate assistance. If there are any current or former military pilots aboard, please identify yourselves to the cabin crew immediately." Vex's eyes snapped open, her combat-trained reflexes instantly alert. Around her, passengers murmured nervously, phones illuminating worried faces as they tried to comprehend the unprecedented announcement. A flight attendant moved urgently down the aisle, her usual smile replaced by barely controlled anxiety. Vex raised her hand without hesitation, muscle memory overriding the civilian clothes she wore and the commercial flight she'd boarded in Tokyo just hours earlier. "Ma'am, are you military?" the attendant asked, her voice tight with hope and desperation. "Major Valkyrie Nakamura, United States Air Force. Call sign Vex. What's the situation?" Vex's voice carried the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to life-or-death decisions at Mach 2.2. The attendant's relief was palpable as she leaned closer. "There's been an incident. The captain needs to speak with you immediately. We have." She paused, glancing around at the listening passengers, an escort situation developing. Through the small oval window, Vex caught a glimpse of something that made her blood run cold. Running lights. 2 sets of them, keeping precise formation just beyond the wingtip. Military aircraft. In international airspace. At this altitude, there were only a handful of aircraft capable of matching their speed and position, and none of them belonged to friendly forces conducting routine operations. The flight attendant was already moving, gesturing for Vex to follow toward the cockpit. As she unbuckled her seatbelt, Vex's mind raced through possibilities, each scenario more troubling than the last. Her fellow passengers watched with growing unease as she made her way forward, their vacation flights and business trips suddenly transformed into something far more dangerous. The comfortable illusion of civilian safety was dissolving rapidly at 37,000 feet, and Major Valkyrie Nakamura found herself once again being called to serve, this time in the most unlikely battleground imaginable. Captain Morrison's weathered hands gripped the yoke with white-knuckled intensity as Vex entered the cockpit. His co-pilot, a younger man whose confident demeanor had been replaced by barely concealed panic, pointed toward the radar display with a trembling finger. "Major, we've got 6, no, 8, unidentified aircraft maintaining formation around us. They appeared on radar 30 minutes ago, climbing from below. No radio contact, no transponder codes, nothing." Vex studied the green blips surrounding their position on the screen, her trained eye immediately recognizing the tactical formation. "Captain, with respect, these aren't unidentified. This is a professional intercept pattern. Someone knows exactly who we are and where we're going." She leaned closer to examine the radar signature characteristics. "Based on their climb rate and current altitude capability, I'd estimate we're dealing with advanced fighters. Possibly Sukhoi Su-35s or similar generation aircraft." The radio crackled with static, then a voice emerged speaking heavily accented English. "United Airlines Flight 891, you are ordered to divert immediately to coordinates we will provide. Acknowledge and comply within 60 seconds or we will take corrective action." Morrison looked at Vex with desperate eyes. Major, I've been flying commercial for 23 years. I've never seen anything like this. These aren't our guys, are they? Vex shook her head grimly. No, sir, they're not. And the fact that they know your flight number and exact position means they've been tracking us for some time. She moved to the radio controls. Captain, I need to take point on communications. These pilots are speaking the international language of force, and unfortunately I'm fluent. Through the cockpit windows, she could now clearly see the sleek silhouettes of fighter aircraft maintaining perfect formation just beyond their wingtips. The moonlight reflected off their angular surfaces, revealing swept-back wings and twin engines that marked them as air superiority fighters, aircraft designed to dominate the skies and eliminate threats with ruthless efficiency. This is Major Valkyrie Nakamura, United States Air Force, aboard United Airlines Flight 891. She transmitted on the International Emergency Frequency. Identify yourselves and state your intentions regarding this civilian aircraft. The response came immediately, cold and professional. Major Nakamura, your reputation precedes you. We are aware of your service record in Syria and your expertise in air-to-air combat. This makes our current situation rather interesting, wouldn't you agree? Vex's blood chilled. Someone had done their homework, and that meant this intercept was no random act of aggression. This was personal, calculated, and extremely dangerous. She glanced at Captain Morrison, whose face had gone pale as the implications began to sink in. The radio crackled again with mechanical precision. Major Nakamura, you have 45 seconds to convince Captain Morrison to alter course to the coordinates we will transmit. Your passenger's safety depends entirely on your persuasive abilities. We understand you have significant experience in making difficult decisions under pressure. Vex closed her eyes briefly, her mind racing through tactical options while her heart hammered against her ribs. Around them, 347 innocent passengers slept or worried in their seats, completely unaware that their lives now hung in the balance of a deadly game being played at 6 miles above the Pacific Ocean. The weight of command, which she thought she'd left behind in her Air Force career, had found her once again, this time with stakes higher than any combat mission she'd ever flown. 40 seconds, Major, the voice continued with chilling calmness. We suggest you make your recommendation to the captain quickly. The fighters maintained their formation with mechanical precision as Vex opened her eyes and faced the most critical decision of her life. In the distance, she could see the faint glow of dawn beginning to touch the horizon, but whether any of them would live to see that sunrise now depended entirely on the choices made in the next few moments. The civilian aircraft she'd boarded as a passenger had become a weapon in someone else's war, and Major Valkyrie Nakamura was the only person aboard qualified to fight back. Captain, she said quietly, her voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them, I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. Captain Morrison nodded tensely as Vex moved to the navigation controls, her fingers dancing across the instruments with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd spent years managing life-or-death situations at supersonic speeds. These coordinates they're transmitting, it's a trap. The heading they want us to follow will take us directly over North Korean airspace, where they'll claim we violated their territory. Once we're there, they can justify shooting us down as a defensive action. The co-pilot, Lieutenant Phillips, according to his nameplate, stared at her with wide eyes. But if we don't comply, won't they shoot us down anyway? Not necessarily, Vex replied, studying the tactical display. They've had multiple opportunities to engage, but they haven't. That tells me they need us alive, at least temporarily. The question is why? She keyed the radio again, buying precious time. Unidentified aircraft, this is Major Nakamura. I need clarification on your authority to divert a civilian aircraft in international airspace. The response carried a hint of amusement. Major, your tactics are admirable but transparent. You're attempting to establish legal grounds for noncompliance while simultaneously gathering intelligence on our capabilities and intentions. Unfortunately for you, we are not bound by the same rules of engagement that constrained you during your previous military service. Vex's jaw tightened. Whoever was commanding this intercept knew her background intimately, too intimately for comfort. "Captain Morrison," she said quietly, "I need you to gradually reduce airspeed. Make it look like compliance preparation, but I want you to drop us to the edge of stall speed. Major, at this altitude, that's extremely dangerous." "I know exactly what I'm asking, Captain. Trust me." Vex's eyes remained fixed on the formation of fighters surrounding them. "These aircraft have minimum engagement speeds. If we can force them below their optimal flight envelope, we might create an opportunity." Through her headset, she could hear the lead fighter's engines changing pitch as the pilot compensated for their decreasing airspeed. The formation began to spread slightly, the precise geometry becoming looser as the fighters struggled to maintain position while flying slower than their optimal cruise speed. "Major Nakamura," the radio crackled, "we are aware of your tactical maneuvering. Increase airspeed immediately or we will interpret your actions as hostile intent." Vex smiled grimly. "There it is, Captain. They've just confirmed they need us intact. A hostile aircraft would have been engaged already." She keyed her microphone once more. "Unknown aircraft, I'm a passenger on this flight, not its pilot. I don't have authority to alter our course or speed. Perhaps you should direct your demands to Captain Morrison." 30 seconds, Major. Do not test our patience further." The Boeing 777 continued its controlled deceleration, now flying at barely above minimum speed for their altitude. The fighter formation had spread to nearly a mile on each side, their pilots fighting to maintain formation integrity while operating outside their aircraft's optimal performance envelope. In the distance, Vex could see additional radar contacts, more aircraft approaching from the east. "Captain," she whispered urgently, "in approximately 15 seconds, I need you to execute an emergency descent. Drop the nose, deploy speed brakes, and dive as steeply as this aircraft can handle." "Major, that will put us into an unrecoverable." "Just be ready, Captain, on my mark." Vex watched the radar display as the additional contacts drew closer, her experienced eye reading the tactical situation like a chess master studying the board. Everything depended on timing, precision, and the hope that her years of combat experience had taught her to read enemy intentions correctly. The lives of 347 passengers hung in the balance, and Major Valkyrie, Vex, Nakamura, was about to gamble everything on a single, desperate maneuver. The radio fell silent, except for the steady hiss of static, as both sides prepared for the next move in their deadly game of aerial chess. The new radar contacts materialized into a formation of F-22 Raptors, their stealth signatures becoming visible only as they closed to within 20 miles of the intercept. Vex's heart leaped as she recognized the distinctive flight pattern of her old squadron, the 94th Fighter Squadron out of Langley Air Force Base. Someone in the Pentagon had been monitoring the situation and scrambled a response, but they were still minutes away from effective intervention range. "Unknown aircraft, this is Raptor Lead," came a familiar voice over the emergency frequency. "You are ordered to disengage from the civilian aircraft immediately and return to your point of origin." Vex recognized the voice instantly, Colonel Marcus "Hawkeye" Thompson, her former squadron commander and the pilot who had trained her in advanced air-to-air combat tactics. His presence meant the Air Force was taking this intercept seriously, treating it as a potential act of war rather than a civilian aviation incident. The lead interceptor's pilot responded with icy calm. "American fighters, you are in international airspace with no authority to interfere with our lawful interception of a suspected smuggling operation. United Flight 890, one is carrying contraband materials and must be diverted for inspection." "Bullshit," Vex muttered, then keyed her microphone. "Raptor Lead, this is Major Vex Nakamura aboard the civilian aircraft. These are not customs officials. Repeat, This is not a law enforcement operation. Vex, Colonel Thompson's surprise was evident even through the radio static. What the hell are you doing on that plane? Wrong place, wrong time, sir. But I'm here now, and we've got a situation. Vex quickly briefed him on the tactical positioning and the interceptor's demands, her voice professional despite the surreal circumstances of coordinating military operations while seated in a commercial airliner's cockpit. Captain Morrison continued the gradual deceleration, sweat beading on his forehead as he fought to maintain control of an aircraft operating at the very edge of its flight envelope. Through the windscreen, they could see the intercepting fighters adjusting their positions, their pilots clearly struggling to maintain formation at such low airspeeds. "Vex, I need you to assess those aircraft," Colonel Thompson transmitted. "Can you identify their origin and capabilities?" Vex studied the silhouettes visible in the moonlight, her trained eye cataloging every detail. "Hawkeye, based on configuration and performance characteristics, I'm looking at Su-35 Flankeries. Twin-engine, thrust vectoring, probably carrying a full air-to-air loadout. They've got the range to have launched from either the Kurils or potentially a carrier group." "Copy that. How many souls on board your aircraft?" 350, including crew. Captain Morrison is doing excellent work keeping us stable, but we're running out of options up here. The F-22 formation continued their approach, but Vex knew that even the world's most advanced fighters would be limited in their ability to engage hostile aircraft so close to a civilian airliner. The interceptors had chosen their tactical position brilliantly, using the passenger jet as both target and human shield. "Major Nakamura," the lead interceptor transmitted, "your former colleague's arrival has complicated our situation, but it does not change our requirements. You will still divert to the coordinates we have provided, or we will be forced to demonstrate our resolve." One of the flanking fighters suddenly accelerated, closing to within 100 feet of the airliner's wingtip. Passengers on the starboard side began screaming as they caught sight of the military aircraft, its weapons pylons clearly visible in the moonlight. The fighter's pilot held position for exactly 10 seconds, then smoothly returned to formation, a clear demonstration of both capability and intent. "Jesus Christ," Captain Morrison breathed, his hands shaking slightly on the controls. "Major, I've got 347 people on this plane. I can't risk their lives in some kind of military standoff." Vex understood his position completely, but she also recognized the larger implications. "Captain, if we comply with their demands, we're not saving those lives, we're just prolonging the inevitable. Once they have us in the location they want, they control the narrative completely." Colonel Thompson's voice cut through the debate. "Vex, we're going to attempt a harassment maneuver to break up their formation. When you see us engage, I need you to be ready." "Ready for what, sir?" "Ready to do what you do best, Major, fly." The radio crackled once more with the mechanical voice of the lead interceptor. "All aircraft, you have 60 seconds to clear this airspace. The civilian aircraft will comply with our lawful orders, or we will interpret any interference as an act of aggression warranting immediate response." In the distance, Vex could see the F-22s accelerating into attack formation, their angular shapes barely visible against the star-filled sky. The most dangerous game of chicken in aviation history was about to begin, with 347 innocent lives hanging in the balance at 37,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean. The first F-22 Raptor screamed past the formation at Mach 1.2, its sonic boom rattling the airliner's windows and causing several of the intercepting fighters to break formation momentarily. The psychological impact was immediate and calculated, a demonstration of the Raptor's superior speed and agility that forced the enemy pilots to recalculate their tactical advantages. "Now, Captain," Vex shouted as the hostile formation wavered. "Emergency descent maximum rate." Captain Morrison pushed the yoke forward without hesitation, and the Boeing 777 dropped like a stone, its passengers suddenly experiencing negative G-forces that pressed them against their seatbelts and sent loose items floating toward the cabin ceiling. The aircraft's speed brakes deployed with a thunderous roar, and the descent rate climbed past 6,000 feet per minute. The Su-35 pilots, caught off guard by the airliner's sudden dive, struggled to maintain visual contact while dealing with the chaotic airspace now filled with supersonic American fighters. Two of the interceptors attempted to follow the diving airliner, but found themselves unable to match the Boeing's descent rate without entering an unrecoverable dive of their own. "Vex, that was beautiful." Colonel Thompson's voice carried a note of admiration. "You just forced them into a position where they can't maintain weapons lock without risking collision." Through the cockpit windows, Vex watched the hostile fighters climbing back to altitude, their formation in disarray as they attempted to re-establish tactical coherence. The F-22s continued their harassment tactics, using their superior maneuverability to break up any attempt at reorganization, while maintaining strict rules of engagement that avoided direct confrontation. "Raptor lead, one of the hostiles is painting us with targeting radar," came a transmission from Raptor 3. "Request permission to defend." "Negative, maintain position. We are not authorized to engage unless fired upon." Vex keyed her microphone urgently. "Hawkeye, we need to get this aircraft to friendly airspace before they regroup. How far to the nearest military installation?" "Yokota Air Base is 180 nautical miles northeast. Can your pilot make it?" Captain Morrison, now flying at 22,000 feet and climbing back to cruising altitude, nodded grimly. "We've got the fuel, but these engines weren't designed for this kind of maneuvering. I can't guarantee how much more stress they can take." The lead Su-35 pilot came back on frequency, his earlier calm replaced by barely controlled anger. "Major Nakamura, your tactical cleverness has earned you nothing but time. We know your destination and we will be waiting." "Then you'll have a long wait," Vex replied coolly. "This is international airspace, and this aircraft is under the protection of the United States Air Force." "The protection of 4 fighters against 8. Your mathematics are flawed, Major." Colonel Thompson cut into the exchange. "Unknown aircraft, this is your final warning. Clear this airspace immediately or face the consequences." "And what consequences would those be, Colonel? You cannot engage us without risking the civilian aircraft, and we are prepared to accept that risk. Are you?" The tactical stalemate was clear to everyone involved. The F-22s possessed superior technology and pilot training, but they were constrained by rules of engagement designed to prevent international incidents. The Su-35s, operating under different authority structures, could afford to be more aggressive while using the airliner as both target and shield. Vex studied the radar display, her mind working through possibilities with the cold calculation of a chess grandmaster. Somewhere in this deadly equation was a solution that would save 347 innocent lives while avoiding the kind of international incident that could spark a broader conflict. She just needed to find it before the hostile pilots regrouped and implemented whatever backup plan they had prepared. "Captain Morrison," she said quietly, "I need you to contact air traffic control and request immediate clearance to Yokota Air Base. Emergency priority." "Done." Morrison was already reaching for his radio. "Tokyo Control, this is United 891 declaring an emergency and requesting immediate clearance to Yokota Air Base." The response was swift and professional. "United 891, you are cleared direct to Yokota, descend and maintain flight level 200. Contact approach on 126.2. Through her headset, Vex heard the lead interceptor pilot conferring with someone in a different language. Russian, she thought, though she couldn't make out the specific words. Whatever they were discussing, it didn't sound like a retreat. Colonel Thompson's voice cut through her thoughts. "Vex, we've got more contacts approaching from the west. Looks like they called for reinforcements." The Boeing 777 adjusted course toward Yokota Air Base as dawn continued to break across the Pacific horizon, its passengers still largely unaware that they had become pawns in a high-stakes military confrontation. Major Valkyrie, Vex, Nakamura remained at the controls she had never expected to need again. Her years of combat experience the only thing standing between 347 innocent lives and an international incident that could change the balance of power in the Pacific theater forever. The new radar contacts resolved into 4 additional Su-35 fighters approaching from the west, their flight path indicating they had launched from a different base or carrier group. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly as the hostile force grew to 12 fighters against the 4 F-22 Raptors providing escort. "This is getting ugly, Vex," Colonel Thompson transmitted privately on a secured frequency. "I've got orders to maintain escort, but if they keep adding aircraft, we're going to be seriously outnumbered." Vex watched the tactical display with growing concern. "Hawkeye, what's our ETA to Yokota's air defense identification zone?" 14 minutes at current speed. But these new contacts are positioning to intercept us before we reach JADIZ boundaries. Captain Morrison overheard the exchange and looked at Vex with barely concealed panic. "Major, my passengers are starting to ask questions. The cabin crew is doing their best to keep everyone calm, but people can see the military aircraft through the windows. How long can we maintain this fiction that everything's normal?" "As long as we have to, Captain. The moment those passengers panic, we lose our tactical flexibility." Vex studied the approaching contacts, her trained eye reading their formation and speed. These new aircraft aren't configured the same way as the original interceptors. Look at their flight profile. They're heavier, probably carrying external fuel tanks for extended range operations. The lead Su-35 pilot came back on frequency with renewed confidence. "Major Nakamura, as you can observe, the tactical situation has evolved. We now have sufficient assets to ensure your compliance regardless of American escort operations. You will divert to the coordinates previously provided." "Negative," Vex replied immediately. "This aircraft remains under United States protection and will proceed to its declared destination." "Then you have chosen to escalate this situation beyond diplomatic resolution. So be it." The hostile aircraft suddenly accelerated into attack formation, their positions shifting from escort to intercept geometry. The F-22s responded immediately, moving to defensive positions around the airliner while maintaining strict adherence to rules of engagement that prevented them from firing first. "Raptor flight, weapons tight, Colonel Thompson commanded. "Do not engage unless fired upon." Through the cockpit windscreen, Vex could see one of the Su-35s closing to within 50 feet of their port wingtip, close enough to see the pilot's helmet and oxygen mask. The fighter's weapons pylons were clearly visible, loaded with air-to-air missiles that could destroy the airliner in seconds. "Captain Morrison," she said calmly, "I need you to maintain exact heading and airspeed. No sudden movements, no course corrections. Let them think they're in control." "Major, what are you planning?" "I'm buying us time until we reach Japanese airspace. Once we cross into JADIZ, the rules change completely." The radio crackled with a new voice, speaking English with a crisp Japanese accent. "Unknown aircraft intercepting United Airlines Flight 891. This is Japan Air Self-Defense Force. You are approaching Japanese territorial airspace. Identify yourselves immediately and state your intentions." Vex smiled grimly. The cavalry was arriving, even if they were still minutes away from visual contact. The Japan Air Self-Defense Force operated Eagles and had been America's closest military ally in the region for decades. Their involvement would change the tactical equation significantly. Japanese fighters, this is a lawful interception of suspected smuggling activities, the lead Su-35 pilot responded. We request you maintain distance and allow us to complete our operation. Negative. All foreign military aircraft must clear Japanese airspace immediately. You have no authority to conduct operations in this region. The formation of hostile fighters began to spread wider, clearly preparing for the arrival of additional forces. Vex could see the tension in Captain Morrison's shoulders as he fought to maintain steady flight while surrounded by enough firepower to level a small city. 10 minutes to JADIZ, she announced quietly. Just hold steady, Captain, we're almost home. But even as she spoke, Vex noticed one of the Su-35s falling back behind the formation, positioning itself in the classic setup for a missile attack. The pilot was subtle about it, using the radar shadows of other aircraft to mask his movement, but her combat-trained eye caught the tactical shift immediately. Hawkeye, she transmitted on the secure frequency. Bandit 7 is maneuvering into attack position. This is about to go kinetic. Colonel Thompson's response was immediate and professional. All Raptors, defensive posture. Vex, get ready to take evasive action. The next few minutes would determine whether 347 innocent passengers would see another sunrise. And Major Valkyrie, Vex, Nakamura, found herself once again preparing for the kind of life-or-death decision that had defined her military career. The Su-35 in trail position suddenly lit up its fire control radar. The electronic warfare systems aboard the F-22s immediately detecting the targeting lock. The high-pitched warble of radar warning receivers filled the radio frequency as multiple aircraft detected the hostile targeting signature. Raptor lead Bandit 7 has locked onto the civilian aircraft, Raptor 3 transmitted tensely. Request permission to engage. Colonel Thompson's voice remained steady despite the escalating situation. Weapons free, weapons free. Engage if he goes active. Vex felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with imminent combat, her body automatically responding to threat conditions she had experienced dozens of times during her service in Syria. But this time was different. She wasn't strapped into an F-22 with defensive systems and countermeasures. She was a passenger aboard a defenseless airliner, responsible for hundreds of lives with no weapons except her tactical knowledge. Captain Morrison, when I give the word, I need maximum performance from this aircraft. Forget the passenger comfort regulations. Forget the structural stress limits. Push this Boeing like it's a fighter jet. Morrison nodded grimly, his hands already positioned on the controls. Just tell me what you need, Major. The trailing Su-35 suddenly accelerated, closing the distance to optimal missile range. The F-22s moved to intercept, but they were constrained by the need to avoid endangering the civilian aircraft while positioning for defensive engagement. Major Nakamura, came the cold voice of the lead interceptor, you have forced this escalation through your noncompliance. The responsibility for what happens next rests entirely with you. Vex keyed her microphone with deadly calm. The responsibility rests with the pilots who chose to threaten a civilian aircraft in international airspace. You want to start a war over this. That's your choice, but you'll have to go through the United States Air Force to get it. The radar warning receiver suddenly went silent as the Su-35 broke target lock, but Vex knew it was only a temporary reprieve. The pilot was repositioning for a better attack angle, one that would minimize the risk of engaging the F-22 escorts while maximizing his chance of a successful missile launch. 8 minutes to JADIZ, Colonel Thompson announced. Japanese fighters are scrambling from Misawa and Chitos, ETA 6 minutes. Through the cockpit windscreen, Vex could see the first pale hints of dawn reflecting off the ocean surface far below. What had begun as a routine red-eye flight from Tokyo was becoming one of the most dangerous aerial confrontations since the Cold War, with her caught in the middle as both passenger and tactical coordinator. "Vex," Colonel Thompson transmitted privately, "I need you to know that if this goes bad, we'll do everything we can to protect that airliner. But with 12 hostiles and 4 friendlies, the mathematics are challenging." "I understand, Hawkeye. Just get us to Japanese airspace. Once we're under JASDF protection, the equation changes." The Su-35 in trail position suddenly climbed 1,000 feet, gaining the altitude advantage necessary for an optimal missile engagement envelope. His targeting radar came back online, now with a perfect shot at the airliner's engines and fuel tanks. "He's going active," Raptor 3 called out. "Missile launch, missile launch." Vex saw the brief flare of rocket motor ignition in her peripheral vision as an R-77 air-to-air missile separated from the Su-35 weapons pylon. "Now, Captain. Dive, maximum rate, deploy everything." Captain Morrison pushed the yoke forward with brutal efficiency. The Boeing 777 dropping into the steepest descent, the aircraft was capable of while speed brakes, flaps, and landing gear deployed in a desperate attempt to disrupt the missile's targeting solution. The R-77 screamed past their previous position, its proximity fuse triggering harmlessly in empty air as the airliner's radical defensive maneuvering broke the targeting lock. But Vex knew they had only seconds before the Su-35 pilot could reposition for another shot. "Raptor 2, engaging," came the calm voice over the radio, as one of the F-22s finally had a clear shot at the hostile aircraft. The sky lit up with the brilliant flare of an AIM-120 AMRAAM missile launch as the American fighters transitioned from escort to active combat operations. The aerial battle that Major Valkyrie Vex Nakamura had been trying to avoid had finally begun, with 347 innocent lives caught in the middle of a shooting war at 37,000 feet. The AIM-120 AMRAAM streaked through the dawn sky with deadly precision, its advanced guidance system tracking the Su-35 that had initiated hostilities. The Russian pilot, suddenly finding himself the target rather than the aggressor, deployed chaff and flares while executing a violent defensive maneuver that broke his formation position. "Splash 1," Raptor 2 called out as the missile found its mark, the Su-35 exploding in a brilliant fireball that briefly illuminated the sky brighter than the rising sun. The destruction of their lead aircraft sent the remaining hostile fighters into chaos, their tight formation dissolving as pilots sought separation and defensive positioning. But the tactical situation remained desperate. 11 hostile aircraft still surrounded the defenseless airliner, and they now had clear justification for treating the engagement as active combat. All aircraft, this is JASDF control," came a new voice speaking precise English. "Japanese fighters are entering the area. Foreign military aircraft must clear Japanese airspace immediately or face engagement." Captain Morrison fought to regain control of the Boeing 777 after their emergency descent, the aircraft's systems protesting the violent maneuvering they had never been designed to endure. Warning lights illuminated across the instrument panel as engines strained beyond their operational limits. "Major, I've got engine overheat warnings and structural stress indicators across the board," he reported through gritted teeth. "This aircraft wasn't built for combat maneuvering." Vex watched the tactical display as more radar contacts appeared from the east, Japanese, Eagles approaching at high speed from multiple air bases. The cavalry was finally arriving, but the question remained whether they would arrive in time to prevent a massacre in international airspace. "Raptor flight, we've got multiple missile launches," Colonel Thompson announced with professional calm that belied the desperate nature of their situation. Defensive, chaff and flares." The sky erupted in electronic warfare countermeasures as both sides deployed defensive systems. The F-22 stealth characteristics provided some protection, but at close-range engagement distances, even the world's most advanced fighters were vulnerable to determined attackers. Two more Su-35s broke from the formation, positioning themselves for coordinated attacks on the airliner from different vectors. Their pilots had clearly decided that eliminating their primary target was worth the risk of engaging superior American fighters in direct combat. "Vex, I need you to coordinate with Captain Morrison," Colonel Thompson transmitted urgently. "We can't provide effective cover if you keep changing altitude and heading. Pick a course and stick with it." "Understood. Captain, maintain current heading toward Yokota, best possible speed. Don't deviate regardless of what happens around us." Morrison nodded tersely, pushing the throttles forward despite the engine warning indicators. The Boeing 777 accelerated toward its maximum operational speed as Japanese territorial airspace drew closer with agonizing slowness. The first wave of Japanese Eagles arrived like angels of salvation, their powerful radars immediately illuminating the hostile aircraft with targeting solutions. The psychological effect was immediate. Several of the Su-35 pilots broke off their attack runs, suddenly facing overwhelming odds as the tactical situation shifted dramatically against them. "Unknown aircraft, this is JASDF Eagle Lead. You have entered Japanese airspace without authorization and engaged in hostile acts against a civilian aircraft. Surrender immediately, or we will engage with lethal force." The response from the remaining Su-35 was another coordinated missile launch, this time targeting both the F-22s and the newly arrived Japanese fighters. The dawn sky lit up with the contrails of multiple air-to-air missiles as the largest aerial combat engagement since World War II began in earnest above the Pacific Ocean. Vex found herself in the surreal position of coordinating a multinational air defense operation from the cockpit of a civilian airliner, her combat experience proving invaluable even without access to military aircraft or weapon systems. The irony was not lost on her. She had retired from active duty to escape exactly this kind of life-or-death responsibility, only to find it pursuing her at 35,000 feet above the ocean. "5 minutes to Yokota Air Base," she announced as the aerial battle raged around them. "Just hold on, everyone. We're almost home." But even as she spoke, Vex could see more radar contacts approaching from the west, reinforcements for the hostile forces that threatened to turn their escape into an even deadlier confrontation. The aerial battle reached its crescendo as Japanese F-15J Eagles,